I was 33 years old when it happened, and by then, I thought I had the perfect life. My wife Sarah and I had worked hard for everything we had. I was a financial consultant, she was a corporate lawyer, and between the two of us, we made enough to live in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Chicago. Our house wasn't a mansion, but it was spacious and warm, with a big yard where our 5-year-old son Noah could play. Noah was everything to us. Smart, curious, and always asking questions that made me laugh. He had this bright smile that melted away any stress from work the moment I walked through the door. But with Sarah and I both working long hours, we needed help, someone to watch him when schedules collided. That's when Amanda came into our lives. Amanda was 24, recommended by a coworker. She was studying child psychology at a nearby university and had glowing references. When she first came over for an interview, she seemed shy but sweet, dark hair, round glasses, and a polite way of speaking. Noah warmed up to her immediately, and Sarah felt she was a perfect fit. For the first few weeks, Amanda was exactly what we hoped for. She helped Noah with his coloring books, told him stories, and tucked him in at night with no fuss. But then, little things started to feel off. The first time I noticed it was late one Friday. Sarah and I had gone to dinner, and when we came home, Noah was already in bed. Amanda sat in the living room, sketching in a notebook. "Everything go smoothly?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "He's a good boy, very open-minded." The choice of words struck me as odd. Later, when I checked on Noah, I saw something drawn on the inside of his wrist, an odd spiral drawn in marker. "What's this, buddy?" I asked. Noah shrugged sleepily. "Amanda says it keeps the bad dreams away." The next morning, the spiral was gone, scrubbed clean, but the image stayed in my mind. Over the next week, Noah's behavior changed. He started whispering to himself when he thought we weren't watching. He refused to go into his closet, saying something lived in there. One night, I caught him sitting up in bed, eyes wide open, staring at the corner of the room. "What are you looking at?" I whispered. His little voice trembled. "Amanda says if I look long enough, I'll see them too." My blood ran cold. The next day, I confronted Amanda. "What exactly are you telling my son?" She looked at me calmly, as if the question didn't bother her. "Children are more receptive. They believe what adults have forgotten. He sees things," he told me. I clenched my jaw. "Stick to bedtime stories. That's your job." She lowered her eyes, nodded, and didn't argue, but something in her faint smile made my stomach twist. 2 nights later, Sarah was working late, leaving me alone with Noah. I tucked him in, kissed his forehead, and turned off the light. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to the sound of faint singing. It wasn't Sarah, she wasn't home yet, and it wasn't Noah. He was too young for that low, measured tone. The sound was coming from his room. My heart pounded as I crept upstairs. The closer I got, the clearer it became. A woman's voice, singing something rhythmic, almost like a lullaby in another language. I pushed Noah's door open. Amanda was sitting cross-legged on the floor, a single candle burning in front of her. Noah was asleep in bed, his chest rising and falling steadily. But his small hand was stretched out toward Amanda, palm up, as if offering it. On his wrist was another spiral. This one was darker, almost carved into his skin. "What the hell are you doing here?" I roared. Amanda didn't flinch. She turned her head toward me slowly, her glasses glinting in the candlelight. "You shouldn't interrupt. He's almost ready." I lunged forward, grabbed her by the arm, and yanked her away from the candle. "Get out!" She didn't resist. She stood, brushed herself off, and looked me dead in the eye. "You don't understand, do you? He's marked. They already want him. I'm only guiding the process." Her calmness terrified me more than anything. I shoved her out of the house and locked the door behind her. Noah stirred in his bed, groaning, but didn't wake. When Sarah came home, I told her everything. She wanted to call the police, but without proof, we worried they'd dismiss it as paranoia. Instead, we agreed Amanda was done. We would never let her near Noah again. But Amanda wasn't finished with us. The following Friday, when Sarah and I returned home from a meeting, Noah wasn't in his bed. Panic surged through me as I tore through the house, shouting his name. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. If you ever want to see your son again, you'll follow instructions. Do not call police. 2 million. Tomorrow. I'll tell you where. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. Sarah's face turned as pale as a sheet. "It's her," she whispered. "It's Amanda." I realized then what all the spirals, all the games had been. They weren't supernatural at all. They were psychological tactics, fear, ritual, control. She had groomed Noah into trusting her completely so he wouldn't resist when she took him. This wasn't horror. It was crime. Cold, calculated, and cruel. But Amanda had underestimated us. Our home security system logged every entry and exit. The cameras we'd installed caught her sneaking Noah out through the side door at 8:14 p.m. And though she thought she had control of the situation, she hadn't realized the system uploaded automatically to the cloud. I didn't waste time. I sent everything to the police. The next evening, we followed their lead. They told us to play along, to wait for Amanda's instructions. At 9 o'clock, I received a text. "Warehouse on the east side. Come alone." But when I arrived, I wasn't alone. Unmarked cars surrounded the place, waiting for the signal. I stepped inside. Amanda was there, crouched beside Noah, who sat on a crate with tears streaming down his cheeks. She still looked calm, her glasses reflecting the dim light. "You brought the money?" she asked. "No," I said, my voice shaking. "I brought something better." Police officers stormed in from every side, guns raised. Amanda's composure finally cracked. She grabbed Noah, pressing a knife to his throat. "Back off," she screamed. "I'll do it." For the first time, I saw madness in her eyes. Not calm, not control, just desperation. A negotiator spoke gently, inching closer, distracting her just long enough. One officer lunged, knocking the knife from her hand and pulling Noah away. Amanda shrieked as they forced her to the ground, handcuffing her. Noah ran into my arms, sobbing, his tiny body trembling against me. "Daddy, I was so scared." "I know, buddy," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "It's over. She can't hurt you anymore." Amanda was arrested that night. The story made headlines. Babysitter kidnaps child of wealthy family in failed extortion plot. Reporters called her disturbed. Others called her brilliant. She had been planning it for months, carefully planting ideas in Noah's head, making us believe there was something supernatural happening, when in reality, it was all manipulation. She's in prison now, awaiting trial. But I'll never forget the way she looked at me as they dragged her away. Not with hatred, not even with regret, with certainty, as if she believed deep down that she had been right.
If you like this story, then you should listen to this chilling story.
When I was 35 years old, my life was comfortable, maybe even enviable from the outside. My family and I lived in an upscale neighborhood just outside Boston. The kind of neighborhood with white fences, carefully trimmed hedges, and security cameras at every corner. I had worked hard to get here. I ran a successful tech company that had been acquired by a larger firm, and my wife, Emily, came from an old money family. Together, our finances were secure, and our house reflected it. Marble floors, a wine cellar, a gated driveway. It was the kind of life I used to dream about when I was a broke college student. But the real treasure was our daughter, Lily. She was 6 years old, bright, curious, and full of laughter. She had a way of lighting up every room she entered, and both Emily and I spoiled her, perhaps more than we should have. She was our only child, and we couldn't say no to her big brown eyes and mischievous grin. The only downside of our success was our schedules. Emily managed charity events. I was often in late meetings, and we needed help, someone to watch Lily in the evenings when we weren't home. That's where Hannah came in. Hannah was 23, a local college student studying early childhood education. She was polite, soft-spoken, and most importantly, Lily adored her. From the very first day, Hannah seemed perfect, responsible, attentive, and always ready with creative games or bedtime stories. She became a regular part of our lives within weeks. But looking back, I see the cracks now, the things I ignored. The first time I noticed something off was a Friday night in October. Emily and I had been out at a gala, and when we came home, the house was quiet, too quiet. Hannah sat on the couch, scrolling her phone. "How was she tonight?" I asked. "She's asleep," Hannah said, without looking up. When I went upstairs to check on Lily, I found her tucked in, but her lamp was on, and she was sweating as though she'd been crying. Her voice was groggy when she whispered, "Daddy, she tells me stories about people in the walls." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "She says if I'm bad, the people in the walls will take me away." My skin crawled, but I brushed it off as some weird game Hannah thought would keep Lily in bed. Emily agreed, though she said she'd talk to Hannah. When Emily brought it up the next week, Hannah laughed nervously. "Oh, I didn't mean to scare her. I was just joking. Kids love spooky stories this time of year." It sounded plausible, and because Lily seemed fine afterward, we let it slide. But things escalated. Lily started saying strange things at breakfast. "Hannah says the shadows move when you're not looking." Or, "Hannah says someone is watching me from the closet." At first, we thought it was just imagination, but one night when I tucked her in, she pointed at the corner of her room and whispered, "There, don't you see it?" I looked. Nothing. Just her toys and dresser. But her face was pale, and her small hands clutched my arm tightly. That same week, our house alarm went off twice, motion detected in the hallways while we were out. Both times, police arrived, but no one was found. They blamed technical glitches. Emily grew uneasy. "Do you ever get the feeling Hannah watches us too closely?" she asked one night. "She always knows when we're leaving, when we're coming back. I've seen her staring at the security cameras on her phone." "She has access?" I asked shyly. "She asked me for the code once," Emily admitted sheepishly. "I thought it was in case of emergencies." Something in my gut twisted. The breaking point came on a stormy Saturday evening. Emily had gone to oversee a charity fundraiser, leaving me alone with Lily. Around 9 p.m., I realized Hannah hadn't shown up, though she was scheduled. I was irritated, but secretly relieved. I didn't want her creeping around the house anyway. I tucked Lily into bed myself, kissed her forehead, and poured myself a drink. That's when I heard the sound, creaking upstairs, like footsteps. "Emily?" I called out, though I knew she wasn't home. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace and crept up the stairs. Lily's bedroom door was ajar, though I had closed it minutes earlier. My heart pounded as I pushed it open. The room was empty. Lily was gone. Panic surged through me. I searched the entire floor, calling her name. Nothing. Then I saw the window in her playroom, wide open, the curtains blowing wildly in the wind. My blood ran cold. I dialed 911 immediately. "My daughter's missing, kidnapped," I shouted. The operator tried to calm me, but I was already racing outside into the storm. That's when headlights blinded me, a black van tearing down the driveway. For a split second, I saw Lily's small face pressed against the back window, screaming silently. Without thinking, I jumped into my car and sped after them. Rain hammered the windshield. Tires screeched on wet asphalt. but adrenaline fueled me. I tailed the van across back roads until suddenly it veered into an abandoned warehouse district. The van screeched to a halt. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Hannah. My heart dropped. She was soaked, her hair plastered to her face, but her expression was calm, almost cold. She held Lily in her arms, and my daughter was thrashing, screaming for me. "Give her back!" I roared, stepping out into the rain. Hannah's voice cut through the storm, chilling in its composure. "You don't understand, do you? People like you have everything. Money, power, security. Do you know what it's like to grow up with nothing? To watch your mother work herself to death while rich people live in houses bigger than whole apartment buildings?" I took a step closer, fists trembling. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I didn't want to scare her," she continued, ignoring me, "but fear makes children compliant. Fear makes them easy to move. You wouldn't have left her with me otherwise. And now you'll pay. You'll give me what I want, or she won't come back." She pulled a gun from her jacket. My blood froze. Lily sobbed harder. At that moment, red and blue lights cut through the rain. Police cars swarmed, tires hissing against the wet pavement. Officers jumped out, guns drawn. Hannah's eyes went wide. She looked at me, realization dawning. "You called them." "No," I said. "The house alarm. It was never broken. It logged every time you used the code." Before she could react, officers tackled her, forcing Lily safely into another officer's arms. Hannah screamed, thrashing, spitting curses at me. "You'll never keep her safe," she shrieked. "There are others like me. You rich people think your walls protect you, but greed attracts predators." They dragged her away, her voice echoing even as the rain drowned it out. I rushed to Lily, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She buried her face into my chest, whispering, "Daddy, I was so scared." "I know, sweetheart," I said, my throat tight with tears. "It's over now." The next weeks were a blur of police reports, news coverage, and sleepless nights. Hannah's plan was clear. She had meant to extort millions from us, using Lily as leverage. The horror stories, the handprints, the so-called shadows she told Lily about, it was all a setup. She wanted us paranoid, doubting reality, so when the kidnapping happened, it felt supernatural, unstoppable. But it wasn't supernatural at all. It was just a young woman broken by resentment and greed, willing to terrorize a child for money. Hannah is in prison now, awaiting trial. The media paints her as a tragic figure, a girl who snapped under financial pressure. But I know the truth. I saw the cold calculation in her eye. Sometimes at night, though I lie awake replaying her last words, "There are others like me." And I wonder, how many more are watching, waiting, smiling politely as they walk through the front doors of homes like mine?
Now that you know what happened there, let me tell you about another chilling encounter.
I grew up in a fairly ordinary family. My parents weren't rich, but they worked hard to make sure I never felt like I was missing out on anything. My dad ran a small construction business, often leaving early in the morning and coming back late in the evening with dirt on his boots and exhaustion written on his face. My mom worked part-time at the local library, and she had always been the heart of our family, gentle, kind, and endlessly patient. By the time I was 21, I had moved out of my parents' house to live with my older sister Claire, who had just had her first baby, a boy named Lucas. She and her husband, David, lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the outskirts of town. They both worked demanding jobs, Claire as a nurse at the hospital and David as a manager at a tech company. Their schedules often overlapped, leaving them desperate for someone to look after little Lucas when neither of them could be home. That's where I came in. I had just started community college and was living with them temporarily to save money. So naturally, I offered to help babysit whenever they needed. I loved spending time with Lucas. He was this chubby-cheeked, wide-eyed baby who giggled at the smallest things. His little laughter had a way of softening even the worst days. But as much as I loved being with him, I wasn't always available. I had classes, study groups, and a part-time job at the campus bookstore. So, when Claire and David began searching for a regular babysitter to cover nights and weekends, I understood. They needed someone reliable, someone who could give Lucas their full attention. After a week of interviews, they found her. Her name was Marissa. She was in her late 20s with straight dark hair that framed her pale face, and she carried herself with a strange sort of elegance. She dressed simply, long skirts, button blouses, and she spoke in a calm. The first time I met her, she smiled politely at me, but her eyes lingered a little too long, like she was studying me, trying to read something behind my face. Claire was thrilled to have found her. Marissa had glowing recommendations, years of childcare experience, and even claimed she had studied early childhood education. On paper, she seemed perfect, but from the very beginning, something about her unsettled me. At first, everything seemed fine. Marissa arrived on time, always dressed neatly, and Lucas didn't cry when she held him. In fact, he seemed oddly calm in her arms, almost too calm. Babies usually fussed when someone new came around, but not Lucas. He just stared at her with his big, glassy eyes, as if he recognized her somehow. I told myself I was just being paranoid, but little things began to nag at me. For example, whenever Marissa put Lucas down to sleep, she would hum these strange lullabies. They weren't songs I'd ever heard before. Low, rhythmic chants in a language I didn't understand. The sounds didn't feel soothing. They felt heavy, like they carried some hidden meaning. One night, when Claire and David were working late, I came home early from my shift at the bookstore. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for Marissa's humming. I tiptoed upstairs and peeked into Lucas's room. The blinds were shut, candles flickered near the crib, and Marissa was swaying back and forth, whispering words I couldn't catch, while her hands hovered over Lucas as if she were performing some ritual. I froze. My first instinct was to rush in and demand what she was doing, but something in the way she moved held me back. It didn't look like a game. It looked serious, intentional. Finally, she noticed me. The way her head snapped toward the door made my stomach drop. Her eyes, usually a soft hazel, looked darker in the candlelight, almost black. "Oh, you're home early," she said smoothly, as if nothing were unusual. She blew out the candles quickly and added, "Lucas was fussy. This usually calms him down." Her excuse was simple, but her tone made me shiver. That night, when Claire and David came home, I tried to tell Claire what I saw, but she brushed it off. "You know how it is with babies," she said, exhausted from her shift. "People have their own tricks. If Lucas is sleeping, then she's doing a good job." I wanted to argue, but I didn't want to seem overprotective or paranoid, so I let it go for the time being. But the next few days only made things worse. Lucas began acting strangely. He wouldn't laugh like he used to. He just stared off at the corners of the room, eyes wide, as if he could see something no one else could. He cried at odd hours, inconsolable, his screams piercing through the house in the dead of night. And sometimes, when I walked past his room while Marissa was babysitting, I could hear her whispering. The words weren't English. They weren't soothing baby talk either. They sounded wrong. The final straw came one Friday night. Claire and David had gone out for a rare dinner date, leaving Marissa and me at the house. I decided to stay downstairs and work on an essay, but I kept hearing faint noises above me, Lucas's room. At first, I ignored them, until I realized it wasn't crying or singing this time. It was chanting. I crept upstairs and pressed my ear to the door. My heart pounded as I heard Marissa's voice rise and fall, the words guttural and foreign. Lucas wasn't crying. He was silent. Too silent. I couldn't take it anymore. I pushed the door open. Marissa was kneeling by the crib, her hands stretched over Lucas's tiny body. His eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Around the crib, she had arranged small objects, feathers, bones, and a bowl filled with some dark liquid. When she saw me, her expression twisted into something that was no longer polite or friend. She smiled, slow and sharp, and whispered, "You shouldn't interrupt." My blood ran cold. My first instinct was to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Lucas didn't move. He didn't even blink. My heart raced as I rushed to the crib and scooped him up into my arms. His body was warm, but limp, his eyes still fixed on the ceiling. "What the hell are you doing?" I demanded, clutching him tightly. Marissa didn't answer right away. She stood slowly, her movements deliberate, her eyes never leaving mine. "You don't understand," she said softly, her voice almost pitying. "This isn't what it looks like. I'm protecting him." "Protecting him?" I hissed. "From what?" Her lips curled into a faint smile. "From what's already inside him." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Protecting him? Inside him? It sounded insane. But the way she said it, with such conviction, made my stomach twist with fear. I turned to leave, Lucas cradled against me, but Marissa stepped in front of the door. Her calm, graceful demeanor was gone. She looked wild, her hair disheveled, her eyes burning with something that felt unearthly. "You don't understand," she repeated, her voice sharper now. "He was born under a dark sign. I've seen it before. If I don't keep him bound, it will destroy you all." Her words echoed in my head, but I couldn't believe them. I shoved past her, clutching Lucas, and ran downstairs. I didn't stop until I was outside, standing barefoot on the porch, my chest heaving. Marissa didn't follow. She just stood at the top of the stairs, watching me, her face calm again, almost serene. "You'll see," she said softly, "when it starts." That night, when Claire and David came home, I told them everything. I begged them not to let Marissa back in the house. Claire's face paled, but David was skeptical. "Are you saying she was doing witchcraft?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "Yes," I insisted. "Black magic or something like it. She had bones, candles, a bowl of blood." "Probably something harmless," David muttered, shaking his head. "Old traditions, weird rituals. You're overreacting." But I wasn't. Because over the next few nights, things got worse. Lucas began waking at the same exact time every night, 3:13 a.m. His cries weren't like normal baby cries anymore. They were shrill, piercing, almost inhuman. Sometimes when I went to comfort him, his crib would be ice cold, the blankets damp with some foul-smelling moisture I couldn't explain. One night, I swear I saw something move in the corner of his room. A shadow, darker than the rest, shifting even when the light was steady. Lucas's tiny eyes followed it, wide and terrified. And Marissa? She didn't stop coming around. Even after I begged Claire not to hire her again, I'd catch glimpses of her on the street, watching the house. Once, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw her standing at the edge of our driveway, her face pale in the moonlight, her lips moving as if she were whispering to herself. It felt like we were being hunted, like she had tethered herself to us somehow. One evening, after another night of Lucas screaming uncontrollably, I broke down and called Marissa myself. I told her to leave us alone, to never come near my family again. She laughed. Actually laughed. "You think you can stop this?" she said. "The child belongs to forces older than you can imagine. Without me, you're helpless." I hung up, shaking with rage and fear. But deep down, a terrifying thought lingered. What if she was right? Because every night, Lucas grew worse. And every night, The shadows in our house grew stronger. The breaking point came on a stormy Saturday night. Rain lashed against the windows, the wind howled through the trees, and the whole house seemed to groan under the weight of the storm. Claire and David had gone out for groceries before the storm worsened, leaving me alone with Lucas. By now, I barely slept at all. Every night was a battle, keeping him calm, keeping him safe. But this night felt different. The air was electric, heavy with a pressure that made my ears ring. Lucas started crying around 10 p.m., far earlier than usual, and his tiny body shook with each wail. I carried him around the living room, whispering to him, trying to soothe him. Then I heard it, tapping on the window. 3 sharp knocks. I froze, clutching him tighter. Slowly, I turned toward the glass. Marissa was standing outside in the pouring rain. Her hair clung to her face, her pale skin glowing faintly in the lightning flashes. She was smiling, but her eyes looked black, void-like. I stumbled back, my heart hammering. "Go away!" I shouted through the glass. She didn't move. She just raised her hand, pressed her palm against the window, and whispered something I couldn't hear over the storm. Lucas screamed louder, thrashing in my arms as if in pain. Then the lights flickered and went out. The house was swallowed in darkness. The only sound was the wind outside and Lucas's shrill cries. My phone flashlight cut a small circle through the blackness as I hurried upstairs to his room, desperate to find some candles. But when I entered his room, I froze. The objects Marissa had once placed around the crib, the feathers, the bones, the bowl, were there again. But I hadn't put them there. My hand shook as I reached for the crib, and that's when I saw her. Marissa was inside the room, not outside in the rain anymore, inside, standing by the crib. Her clothes were dry, her hair perfectly neat, her face calm and pale. "You can't keep fighting it," she whispered. "He's chosen. If you don't let me bind it, you'll all burn." I backed away, clutching Lucas. "Stay away from us." Her eyes flickered with something almost sorrowful. "You don't know what you've invited into your home. He isn't just a child. He's a vessel." I didn't wait for her to say more. I bolted down the hall, nearly tripping on the stairs, Lucas screaming in my arms. I ran into the kitchen, grabbed the first weapon I saw, a heavy cast-iron pan, and held it tight, my chest heaving. The storm raged louder. Somewhere upstairs, a door slammed. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming down the hallway. But it wasn't Marissa, because even though she had been in the room with me, I could still hear her voice outside, whispering, chanting. The realization sent ice through my veins. If she was both inside and outside, then what exactly had been standing in Lucas's room? The front door burst open. Claire and David rushed in, dripping wet from the storm. I cried out for them, but before I could explain, a sound tore through the house. A shriek, high and inhuman, echoing off the walls. The lights flickered back to life, just as something crashed in the nursery upstairs. David bolted up first, Claire close behind, and I followed, my heart hammering. When we reached the room, the crib was overturned, the feathers and bones scattered. But Marissa was gone. No sign of her, not in the room, not outside. Just the echo of her voice fading in the storm. The police were called. They searched the house, the neighborhood, everywhere. They never found her, but that wasn't the worst part. When the officers checked the bowl near the crib, the liquid inside wasn't candle wax or some strange mixture. It was blood, and when they tested it later, they confirmed it wasn't animal blood. It was human. Lucas eventually calmed down, though he still woke every night at 3:13 a.m. The doctors said he was healthy, perfectly normal, but I knew better. I could see it in his eyes. Sometimes, when the house was quiet, they'd go blank, like he was staring at something no one else could see. Marissa never returned, but the shadow of her presence lingered. The whispers, the cold spots in the house, the way Lucas sometimes laughed at empty corners of the room. We tried to move on. Claire and David tightened security, installed cameras, even considered moving, but no matter where we went, the same things followed. Because maybe Marissa had been telling the truth. Maybe she hadn't been trying to hurt him. Maybe she had been trying to contain what was already there. And now, it was too late.
If you thought that story was scary, wait until you hear this next one.
I grew up in a small town where everyone seemed to know everyone else's business. My parents had been high school sweethearts, the kind of couple that looked picture perfect from the outside. My dad worked long hours as a mechanic, while my mom stayed home to raise me and my younger brother Ethan. By the time I turned 22, I was living on my own, but I stayed close to family, especially my brother. Ethan had just turned 3, a curious little boy with messy brown curls and a laugh that could melt anyone's heart. He was my mom's shadow most of the time, following her around the kitchen, babbling stories in his toddler language. But my parents were getting busier, especially my dad, whose shop had expanded, and my mom had recently picked up part-time work at a local daycare. With their schedules overlapping, they needed help taking care of Ethan in the evenings. At first, I volunteered as often as I could, but with my own college classes and shifts at the bookstore, it wasn't always possible. That's when my parents started searching for a babysitter. They wanted someone experienced, someone reliable. When they found Camilla, I had an immediate bad feeling. She was in her 30s, tall and slender with long black hair that seemed almost too shiny to be natural. Her skin was pale, her lips painted a deep crimson, and her eyes, dark, sharp, seemed to pierce through whoever she looked at. She wasn't the bubbly, cheerful babysitter type. She carried herself with an unsettling calmness, the kind that made you feel watched, even when she wasn't looking directly at you. My parents, however, adored her. She had glowing references, years of experience, and she was available at odd hours, which was exactly what they needed. She told them she had a way with children, and that kids rarely cried in her care. That alone sold my mom, who admitted she sometimes struggled with Ethan's tantrums. The first time Camilla came over, Ethan didn't cry or fuss like he usually did with strangers. Instead, he reached for her immediately, almost as if he recognized her. She held him close, whispering something into his ear that I couldn't hear. Whatever it was, it made him giggle. Something about that moment chilled me to the bone. At first, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Babysitters had their own ways of connecting with children, right? Maybe Camilla was just especially good with kids. But the more I saw her, the less convinced I became. For one, she always insisted on putting Ethan to bed herself. If my mom tried to do it before leaving for work, Camilla would intervene gently but firmly, saying, "No, let me. It's important he learns to sleep peacefully." My mom, exhausted and grateful for the help, didn't see the harm. But to me, it felt possessive, like she wanted complete control. Then there were the little things. The way she'd hum lullabies I'd never heard before, low and melodic, almost like chants. The way she'd shut all the windows and cover Ethan's crib with strange fabrics, deep reds and blacks that didn't feel like baby blankets. And the way Ethan began to change. He stopped laughing as much. He stopped talking in his bubbly, excited way. Instead, he'd stare at the corners of the room, eyes wide, as if he could see something the rest of us couldn't. Sometimes at night, I'd hear him giggling softly to himself in the dark, whispering words I couldn't understand. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. My parents weren't back yet, and I wanted to check on Ethan. As I crept down the hall, I heard Camilla's voice. It wasn't the usual soft humming. It was chanting, low, guttural words in a language I didn't recognize. I pushed the door open just a crack and froze. Camilla was standing beside Ethan's crib, holding a small bundle of herbs in one hand and tracing patterns in the air with the other. The room smelled strongly of smoke and something bitter, almost metallic. Ethan wasn't asleep. He was sitting upright in the crib, eyes wide, staring at her as if entranced. When she noticed me, she didn't flinch. She simply smiled, calm and collected, as though she had been expecting me. "You shouldn't interrupt," she said softly, her tone more warning than reprimand. I backed out quickly, my heart pounding. Later that night, when I tried to tell my mom, she sighed and dismissed it. "You watch too many horror movies," she said. "If she's helping him sleep, that's all that matters." But I knew what I saw wasn't normal. And the worst part? Ethan had started drawing. He had barely learned to hold crayons properly, but now he'd sit for hours scribbling shapes on paper. Circles, lines, symbols that looked far too deliberate for a toddler. One of them, I swear, matched the pattern I'd seen Camilla trace in the air. Something was happening in our house, and Camilla was at the center of it. Over the next week, Ethan's behavior went from strange to terrifying. He hardly ever spoke anymore, except in whispers when no one else was around. At night, I'd hear his small voice through the walls, muttering in that same foreign language Camilla used. Sometimes he laughed, but it wasn't his sweet childlike giggle. It was lower, heavier, like it didn't belong to a 3-year-old at all. One night, I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. I assumed it was my mom coming home late from her shift, but when I stepped out of my room, the hallway was empty. Still, I heard faint whispers coming from Ethan's room. I pushed the door open slowly. My stomach twisted. Ethan was standing on his crib mattress, his tiny hands pressed against the wall. He was drawing with something dark, smearing strange shapes across the paint. I flicked the light on, and he turned to look at me. His face and fingers were covered in what looked like dried blood. "Ethan!" I gasped, rushing toward him. But when I grabbed his hands, the markings on the wall vanished before my eyes, dissolving like smoke. I blinked hard, wondering if I was losing my mind. Ethan only smiled, his eyes glazed. "Camilla says it keeps the bad ones away," he whispered. I felt sick. The next morning, I tried to convince my parents to fire her. "She's doing something to him," I insisted. "He's not the same anymore. He talks in some weird language. Enough," my dad snapped. "We're lucky to have her. Your mother and I can't be here all the time, and she's good with Ethan. You're stressed from school. Don't take it out on her." I wanted to scream. They couldn't see it, couldn't see how she was sinking her claws deeper into our family. That evening, I decided to keep watching. When my parents left for work, I stayed in my room, pretending to be busy with homework, but really, I was listening. The house was quiet for a long time, too quiet. Then I heard it, the chanting again. This time, I crept silently down the hall and pressed my ear to Ethan's door. The words were clearer now, but still foreign, guttural, rhythmic, like an incantation. I pushed the door open just a crack. Camilla was kneeling on the floor, a circle of black candles lit around her. Ethan was inside the circle, sitting calmly, his small hands resting in his lap. In front of him, Camilla held an old leather-bound book, its pages covered in strange symbols. Her voice rose and fell as she read, the candle flames flickering unnaturally. I gasped before I could stop myself. Camilla's head whipped toward the door, her eyes locking on mine. "Come in," she said softly, almost kindly. "It's time you understood." The way she said it sent chills crawling up my spine. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My hand tightened on the doorknob as she closed the book and slowly rose to her feet. "You think I'm harming him," she said, her voice calm but sharp. "But I'm saving him. Without me, he's nothing but an empty vessel. With me, he will be more than you can imagine." Ethan looked up at me then, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own brother. His eyes, usually bright and innocent, looked darker, older, as though someone else was staring out from inside him. I stood frozen in the doorway, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Ethan's eyes, those dark, unblinking eyes, locked onto mine. It felt like I wasn't looking at my little brother anymore. I was staring into something ancient, something far older than the 3 years he had been alive. Camilla moved closer, her shadow stretching unnaturally across the candlelit floor. "You have no idea what he is, do you?" she whispered, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the air. "This child was born under a blood moon, marked before his first breath. Do you think his sudden fevers, his strange dreams, his unnatural calm around me were accidents? He's chosen." "Chosen for what?" I demanded, though my voice cracked with fear. Her lips curled into a smile. "For greatness, for power, for the ones beyond this world." She glanced at Ethan, then back at me. "I am only guiding what's already inside him. Without me, the voices will tear him apart. With me, he'll live, but as more than human." I shook my head, gripping the doorframe for balance. "He's a little boy, my brother. You're filling his head with your sick." Camilla's face hardened. "You think I forced this? No, he accepts it. He welcomes it." Ethan tilted his head then, and in a voice that didn't sound like his own, he whispered, "She tells the truth." My stomach dropped. That wasn't Ethan's voice. It was deeper, older, like 2 voices speaking at once. Panic surged through me. I rushed forward, scooping Ethan out of the circle, scattering the candles with my foot. The flames sputtered, and Camilla shrieked, not in anger, but in fury, like something precious had been ripped from her grasp. "You fool!" she screamed. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You've broken the binding!" Ethan thrashed in my arms, stronger than he should have been. His tiny hands clawed at me, his voice shrieking words I couldn't understand. I held him tighter, stumbling toward the door. But Camilla lunged, her fingers digging into my arm with inhuman strength. Her nails cut deep, drawing blood. Suddenly, the whole room shuddered. The candles flared, their flames shooting upward unnaturally. The walls groaned, as though the house itself were alive. I ripped free from her grip and ran, clutching Ethan, his screams ringing in my ears. The front door burst open, just as I reached the bottom of the stair. My parents stood there, wide-eyed, dripping from the rain outside. Behind them were flashing red and blue lights, the police. I didn't question it. I shoved Ethan into my mom's arms and shouted, "Get out!" The officers stormed in, guns drawn, as Camilla descended the stairs slowly, her face eerily calm again. "You don't understand," she said to them, her voice smooth and commanding. "The child is dangerous. He needs me." One officer barked at her to stop, but she didn't. She kept walking, her dark eyes never leaving Ethan. Then, without warning, the lights flickered, and she screamed, an inhuman sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. The officers fired. The sound of gunshots echoed through the house. Camilla collapsed, her body twitching unnaturally before going still. When they approached her, though, her body was wrong. Her skin was gray, almost waxy, as if she hadn't been alive for years. The crimson lips, the perfect hair, the pale elegance, it all looked like a mask that had melted away. One officer muttered a prayer under his breath. Another whispered, "What the hell was she?" They bagged her body and took her away. But even as I watched, I swore I saw her lips move, just barely, as if whispering one last curse. Ethan stopped thrashing, stopped screaming. He clung to my mom's shoulder, looking exhausted, almost like his old self again. But when he glanced back at me, his eyes flickered, just for a second, with that same darkness. The house has been quiet since then. My parents don't talk about Camilla, and the police closed the case as quickly as they could, labeling her unstable and burying the stranger details. But I can't forget. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear Ethan whispering in his sleep, the same low guttural words Camilla used to chant. And sometimes, when he laughs, it still doesn't sound like him.
If you like this story, then you should listen to this chilling story.
When I was 34 years old, I thought I had left fear behind me. I had built a stable life, married, a good job, a small house in the suburbs, and my little boy, Daniel, who had just turned 4. But what happened that winter proved that some nightmares don't come from imagination. They come dressed in ordinary clothes, smiling politely, and stepping right into your home when you invite them. It started simply. My wife, Julia, and I needed a babysitter. We rarely went out, but her company was hosting a dinner party downtown, and she insisted I come. Daniel was too young to leave alone, and both sets of grandparents lived out of state. That's when Julia remembered a young woman from her office, a college student named Claire, who was looking for extra work. She's sweet, Julia told me, quiet, studies psychology, loves kids. She could use the money. I wasn't comfortable leaving my son with someone I'd never met, but Julia reassured me. It's just a few hours, she said. We'll be back before midnight. When Claire showed up that Saturday evening, she looked perfectly harmless, maybe too harmless. She was pale, with long straight hair the color of ash. She smiled politely but never quite met my eyes. Something about her felt muted, like she was there but not entirely present. Still, she spoke softly to Daniel, crouched down to his level, and he seemed at ease with her almost instantly. By 7 p.m., Julia and I left for the party. The night was cold, the streets dusted with snow, and as we drove away, I remember glancing back at the house. For some reason, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that I was leaving Daniel in the care of someone I didn't really know at all. The dinner went on longer than expected. We didn't get back until nearly 11:45. When I unlocked the front door, the house was silent. Too silent. The TV was on but muted, and the lights in the living room were dimmed. Claire was sitting on the couch, staring at the blank wall across from her, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Everything okay?" I asked. She turned her head slowly toward me, as if waking from a trance. "He's asleep," she said softly. "He's special." Julia laughed awkwardly. "He is special. Thank you again for staying." She paid Claire, who slipped the cash into her coat pocket and left without another word. When I went upstairs to check on Daniel, I found him asleep, but his room smelled faintly of smoke, like burnt wax. A single black candle sat on his nightstand, extinguished. My stomach tightened. We hadn't left any candles in his room. The next morning, I asked Daniel about it. He yawned and rubbed his eyes. "Claire lit it," he said matter-of-factly. "Why?" I pressed. "She said it helps me dream better. She said the people in the dark want to talk to me." I froze. "What people?" He looked at me blankly, as if I'd asked something obvious. "The ones who live in the corner." We didn't call Claire back after that, but she came anyway. 2 weeks later, Julia and I were both home on a Friday night, curled on the couch watching a movie. Around 9:30, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, there she was, Claire, bundled in her coat, smiling faintly. "I thought you might want help tonight," she said. "No," I said firmly. "We don't need you." Her smile didn't falter. Children need consistency. I shut the door on her. For a moment, I stood there, my heart thudding, listening to her footsteps crunching in the snow as she walked away. That night, Daniel woke screaming. When I ran into his room, he was curled into a ball, his sheets damp with sweat. "She was here," he sobbed. "She was at the window." I pulled back the curtain. Nothing. Just the snow falling silently in the yard. But etched into the glass, faint but clear, was the outline of a handprint, small and delicate, like a woman's. I wish I had listened to my instincts then. Instead, I told myself it was just coincidence, that maybe Daniel imagined things. Life went on, but the unease grew. Daniel began waking at 3 a.m. sharp, every night, sitting upright in his bed, whispering to the empty corners of his room. One night, I pressed my ear to the door and heard him murmuring. His voice was soft, but the words didn't sound like English. It was rhythmic, like chanting. I pushed the door open. He stopped immediately and stared at me, wide-eyed. "She says you shouldn't listen," he whispered. "Who says that?" He tilted his head. "Claire." The final straw came 3 weeks later. Julia had gone out with a friend, leaving me alone with Daniel. Around 10 o'clock, I heard a noise downstairs, like the creak of the back door opening. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down. The living room was empty, but the back door was ajar, letting in a cold gust of wind. And then I heard it, singing. A woman's voice, low and soothing, drifting up from the basement. Every muscle in my body screamed not to go down there. But Daniel was upstairs, asleep. I couldn't risk leaving whatever it was unchecked. I flicked on the basement light and descended the creaking stairs. At the bottom, in the dim glow, I saw Claire. She was kneeling on the concrete floor, her hair hanging over her face, her hands tracing symbols in chalk. Around her were black candles, their flames guttering, though no breeze stirred the air. When she looked up at me, her eyes weren't her own. They were black, bottomless pits. "You're interfering," she said flatly. "The child is chosen. He sees what others cannot. I've been sent to guide him." "You're insane," I spat, tightening my grip on the knife. She smiled then, and it was the first time I saw her true face. Not just pale, but wrong. Her skin rippled, her features shifting slightly, as if her flesh couldn't hold its shape. I lunged forward, knocking over one of the candles. The flames spread across the chalk symbols, burning them away. Claire shrieked, a sound that wasn't human, and the basement light flickered violently. She rushed at me, but I slashed with the knife, catching her arm. Instead of blood, something dark and viscous oozed out, reeking of rot. She screamed again and fled up the stairs, moving faster than I thought possible. By the time I reached the top, the back door was wide open, snow whipping in. She was gone. We called the police that night, but they didn't believe us. They chalked it up to a disturbed babysitter and said they'd look into it. Weeks passed. No word, no trace of her, but the house never felt the same. Daniel's night terrors continued. The handprints on the windows kept appearing, always too high for him to reach. And sometimes, when I walked past a mirror, I swore I saw a pale figure standing behind me. It's been months now, and we've moved to another house, another town. Daniel sleeps a little better here, but not always. Sometimes he still wakes at 3 o'clock in the morning, whispering into the dark. The other night, I asked him what he was saying. He looked at me with those innocent blue eyes and whispered, "I'm telling Claire where we live now."